drop to the break of dawn. Never gonna stop till I see the light. I'm feeling high, my little lady. I'm gonna take it to the other side. You know I used to smoke too much. You know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car. You can get me high, high, high. You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car. We're gonna get real. Oh, I'm feeling good. My little lady, she's gonna take me to the other side. I'm feeling nice, my little lady. She's gonna keep me moving on. I'm gonna run till I drop to the break of dawn. Never gonna stop, she's gonna treat me right. I'm feeling good, my little lady. She's gonna take me to the other side. You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car, and you can get me high, high, high. You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car, and we're gonna get real. Come on, baby. Let's take a ride. I don't know where we're gonna go, but first, let's dance. You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car, and you can get me high, high, high. You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car, and we're gonna get real. Oh, Deborah, things are becoming intense. I ripped my jeans on your fence, hiding away from your man. Oh, it's a passion. Oh, tell a tale of 1,000 lonely days. Yeah, she's the real thing. Yeah. Oh. Hi everyone, Dan here, and I just wanted to put a little snippet about AstroWorld and what we do because I want to start getting the word out because I think it's becoming more and more of a giant community, and I want to get the word out to some other people. So what we do at AstroWorld is we hold astrophotography chats on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. and Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, and we just talk astrophotography. Wednesdays more of a techie kind of advanced intermediate, and Fridays is more of a newbie kind. So if you want to check us out, and if you want to, hang out with some semi-decent people that like to go off the rails a little bit and have fun while they're doing it, come check us out at astroworldweb.com, and you can check out the schedule, and you can sign up for all the free giveaways that we do. We just gave away for an optical filter kit, Charles Brackenstein's books, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So come to astroworldweb.com, hang out with us, have a good time, and as always, remember to keep imaging, keep educating, and clear skies. And I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
want to be together. It's so good to be together with you. If you want to be together, say you want to be together. I'm feeling a little bit guilty, but it feels so fine. Yeah, so good to be together. I'm tearing out my head, 'cause I don't know when so good. So want to be together. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's so good to be together. Yeah, so damn good. If you want to be together, it's so good, it's so good, yeah.
I wonder what it was that made me want you. She couldn't understand what made me hard. She's climbing in and out my open window. I'm laying here alone and cold and drained. Yeah. So take another breath and come up for your oxygen. And now you wanna kiss the flesh and blood of every man, every man. And when the moon is full and the wolves were held, she swam across the lake just to get to my house. Yes. And she said, I want more. Give me more. I want more. A little bit of. Give me more. Disgusting stuff. Disgusting stuff. She looks upon a world that's dark and tangled. I never saw her turn her head and shame. She's standing in and out the open window. I'm lying here alone in cold and gray. So take another breath and come up for your oxygen. Hey, you know you wanna kiss the flesh and blood of every man, every man. Well, we all took turns and it's
What the hell's wrong with my telescope now? Damn, what's wrong with this thing?
The lost Lone Ranger, can I break this spell? You want things right, I make you do things wrong. If I want that fine line, I will always take the fall. If I just do myself,
good tonight, afraid. Oh, what's come of your life? Wait for the time and the place. You'll be back tomorrow. But I'm not afraid to walk through the fire. And I have certainly seen the light. And I don't want you to think that I'm a liar. I'm wanting you to spend the night. So cold as I sit by the phone. You've been told to let your heart move free. I wait for the time and the place. You'll be back tomorrow. Well, I'm not afraid to walk through the fire. And I have certainly seen the light. And I don't want you to think that.
To all assemble everything here, but he goes, no, he says, I need to kind of jump off the deep end of the pool and do it. And I said, that makes a lot of sense. Because this was just basically a stepping to his next down the road. And he's pretty sharp. I got to give him credit. He's a sharp individual. And as I said, I did check out his website. You're right, Craig. He really is something special.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's very, very sharp, very, very technical. And I tell you, he'll be somebody that'll be very, very good to work with. And as I said, I'm glad that it worked out for you. So that's
Yeah,
good
they don't
news.
give PhDs to just anybody.
No.
If you go on 8th Avenue in New York like that. 250 bucks, 8th Avenue.
Isn't that like that senator or something in the Congress that embellished his?
Oh, that's my representative. Yeah,
That's your rep, yeah. And then supposedly didn't he actually, wasn't he like a gangster down there in Brazil or something?
Oh, I don't know. He was.
They were showing the photograph. It's the craziest thing. I guess 20 years ago or 10 years ago, he was one of these dancers they had set down at Carnival. I mean, they got photographs of what the guy looked like.
I did. All I know is, I'll tell you this: I did not vote for him, so I do not. I did not vote for him at all. The guy. I didn't even know who he was until he got on the screen. So I don't even know.
Well, I hope.
Is he your representative?
Hold on a second.
Ooh, man, we got to keep our.
Hold on a second. What's going on here? I think he's got a hot mic.
Ooh, that's what I was afraid of.
I think it's just my mic. No, maybe you guys get off. No,
Yeah, I saw the comment. Nice we can listen in on the pre. Oh, Dave says, still here.
I see it, Dave. 5 minutes. You're going. Okay.
Things are becoming intense. I rip my jeans, no pants, hiding away from your man.
I got quiet.
I'm feeling high.
That's
Yeah, I'm gonna take it to the other side.
still coming through. I'm not sure why. Just, keep the lips up close up. What we come on
Break
We gotta get Craig, and then went to the black hole. Must be a computer.
I used to smoke too much. You know I used to drink too much.
Hey, can you hear us?
You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much.
My video on the screen seems to be lagging about a minute or two behind.
I'm feeling good. My little lady, she's gonna take me to the other side. I'm feeling nice. My little lady,
There we go.
she's gonna keep me moving.
Hey, Craig, wasn't that lady on Christian's show?
Well, I turned my camera off, and it took about a minute to actually turn off on the playback screen, so my video seems to be lagging way behind.
I got your audio exactly the way your mouth is.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We can hear you. We can hear you, Craig.
Yoo-hoo.
Yep. Testing, can you hear us? We can hear you.
I'm back.
Also, Craig.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. My video was lagging about a couple minutes behind.
I mean, like I was saying, your mouth is moving exactly the right way that I do in my earphone. So.
Okay. Is it still okay now?
Yep.
Okay.
You know I used to smoke too much. You know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car, and you can get me high, high, high. You know I used to smoke too much. And you know I used to drink too much. Take a ride in my car, and we're gonna get real. Oh. Deborah, things are becoming intense.
You guys good to go?
I rip my jeans
Ready to
on
go, Dan?
your
Yep.
fence.
All right, here we go. 10 seconds out.
Hiding away
Now they
from
can
your
see us
man.
and watch us and hear us. Hey everybody, what's going on? How's it going? It's Wednesday night, as somebody just told me that it was Wednesday night because I thought it was Friday night. But I lost a couple days. So how's it going, everybody? We made it again tonight for another night of AstroWorld. Glad everybody showed up, and we got Craig Stocks from Utah Desert Remote Observatories. And if you want to go take a look at his website, I'm going to have it scrolling across on the bottom in a second, and you can check out his site at utahdesertremote.com. and we're going to be talking to him about his PixInsight Workflow. You can see the pictures behind him, and maybe we'll get a little peek into the brain of Craig Stocks here. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do all that, let's do the sponsors real quick, because we got some new guests to talk about real quick. So give me 1 second. Let me bring this up real quick. And there we go. And so we're giving away tonight. We're giving away a 1 year subscription to IP for AP tonight, which is pretty cool. And that's from IP for AP. But our main sequence level, who gives us a lot of gift certificates to give away, is Woodland Hills Camera and Telescopes. We give away once a month. We give away gift certificates for them, and we thank them for their support as well. As far as our Red Giant level sponsors are concerned, Primaluce, Camera Concepts, and Optolong, all of which who have signed on for 2024 to 2023 to renew their sponsorship, and we're looking at one more that may be jumping on, so it's going to be really quite interesting to see. Next, at a Supergiant level, like I said, we're giving away a 1 year subscription to IP for AP tonight. We also give away weekly on every Friday night. We give away a free Masters of PixInsight class. So definitely, if you're not signed up for any of these giveaways, sign up for them at www.astroworldweb.com under giveaways. So you can sign up for all of them there. We have some people that have joined us on Patreon. We have a new level of membership called the Off the Rails members. We now have 2 Off the Rails members. And that's the highest level of dollar amount membership that we have. That comes with a lot of great perks for the AstroWorld store. You get like a whole bunch of swag and everything. So it's cool. Quasar members, Dr. Ascari and John G. Thank you so much. Black Hole, Charity, George, and Mike. And then we got all of our Red Giant members, main sequence members. And if you want to join any of this, you could join us either on Patreon or on YouTube. And our Protostar members as well. Thank you so much for all the support. We have over 50 members now that have joined us on either Patreon or YouTube. So thank you so much for the support. It means a lot. Tonight, as everybody knows, we have Craig Stocks tonight from Utah Desert Remote Observatories. He's going to be going over not an APP workflow, a PixInsight workflow. And that was a mistake by myself. So I hope people aren't too disappointed. But I'm sure that PixInsight is one of the premier pieces of software that we use, and it's going to be an awesome time. So it's going to be great. February 1st, my birthday. It's not only my birthday, but we have Mr. Glass Tiger himself, Wayne Parker from Skyshed Observatories, is going to be coming on and hanging out with us, promoting his new Skyshed Pod S. So that's going to be a lot of fun talking to him. He was on Astropalooza as well. February 8th, we got Steve Malia from Starfield Optics coming on. We've all seen Sean Nielsen's pictures and him testing that 8-inch newt that he's been playing with, and it's going to be great to see what Steve has in the loop for Starfield next. So don't miss that. February 22nd, we got Bob Denny for his second visit, talking about ASCOM Alpaca and DC3, which is going to be interesting. March 1st, we booked, I butcher his name every time he's on the show. I'm sorry, Ivo. That's why I call him Ivo. Ivalo Stoyanov from Astrophotography Tool is going to be on for his second show. The last time we had him was when he released 2.0. So it's going to be interesting to see what new things that he's come up with that has been added to APT. So for you APT users out there, he's going to be coming to join us. April 5th. New guest, we have Warren Keller coming on. Masters of PixInsight, IP for AP. You all know Warren. He's also the author of Inside PixInsight. He's going to be on hanging out with us again and doing some stuff on PixInsight as well. And please don't forget to join us on all of our other social media platforms: Discord, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else is out there. We're on there. So thank you so much for dealing with the 7 minutes of torture that I know you go through every week. And that being said, we're going to go back to the 3-up. And 3-up. And titles. And There we go. And there we go. And we're back. So, so again, like I said tonight, we have Craig with us, and I know a lot of people know who you are, Craig. This is not your first time on the show, so thank you for joining us again. Appreciate it.
No problem.
And I know that there was some miscommunication by myself on the website, and we are going to be doing some PixInsight stuff. So before we get into that, why don't you again introduce yourself to the people that may be new to the show and say what you do and talk a little bit about Desert Remote.
Okay. Well, as you said, we have Utah Desert Remote Observatories, and that's online at utahdesertremote.com. We're primarily a remote hosting site. So if you're looking for a place to host a telescope here in the southwest corner of Utah, we'd be happy to talk to you. We also do some hourly rentals. If somebody has a target in mind and they need longer focal length, or if they want to dabble in monochrome rather than one-shot color or a DSLR, they can rent time on our equipment, and it's kind of a we kind of hold your hand and walk you through it. We'll do a Zoom session to talk about your target and setting up the sequence and so forth. So it's a little bit more personal than simply selecting from a list of targets and pushing a go button.
Yeah.
And the way we operate, when you make arrangements to image a certain target, that data belongs to you.
Nice. That's awesome. So very, very
and
good.
I hope your viewers aren't disappointed. We will talk a little bit about PixInsight, but in terms of my workflow, I probably do 80% of it in Photoshop. And I really use PixInsight as a pre-processor for Photoshop.
And that's good, because I know a lot of people have been asking questions, and that's one of the things sooner or later, when in April when Warren comes on as well, is what can Photoshop do for you that not only that PixInsight can't do it, but can Photoshop do it a little bit more efficient or a little different? What tools are a little bit better and that kind of stuff. I know a lot of people have been asking questions over that on the chat in prior weeks as well.
Yeah, and there's no doubt there are things PixInsight does that it does really well that is kind of a struggle to do in Photoshop. I'll stick my neck out and say pretty much anything you can do in PixInsight, you could do in Photoshop. Some of it would be very laborious and painful to duplicate in Photoshop. So, using the right tool for the right job, PixInsight is just fantastic for the calibration and integration steps, stretching the images. But for myself, once I get to that point, I find it easier to work in Photoshop, and that's partly because I've been involved in digital imaging since the mid-1990s and doing photography since the late 60s or early 70s. So I'm very, very familiar with Photoshop. And in fact, when I first started, I started doing everything in Photoshop, and then I kind of gradually started including Deep Sky Stacker to do some of the things it does prior to going into Photoshop, and eventually got to the point where I went all the way into PixInsight and then into Photoshop. And so my workflow has evolved quite a bit over the last couple years. I feel like it's pretty stable now, but a year from now, it may be completely different.
And that's something that Pete and I talk about a lot. And we go back to pretty far as well as software is concerned. I mean, I remember one of the first, and we laugh about it all the time, one of the first guiding programs that came out way back. I don't even know what year it was, but it was called Guide Dog. And, like how PixInsight, not PixInsight, PhD2 has, loses a star, it does that annoying bing, bing, whatever. In this case, you lose a star and it barked at you. And it was like, woof, woof. It was just like this whole thing. It didn't work very well, but it was what we had at the time. But
yeah, I'm fortunate that I came along at a good time. I picked up PixInsight about the time I think WBPP was really coming into its own as a robust script to automate the process. So I basically, as I dipped my toes in less than a year ago, once I realized WBPP was there to duplicate most of the functions that I was doing in Deep Sky Stacker, that really streamlined the whole process.
Yeah.
And of course, the Russell Croman's tools are a big part of my workflow.
Yeah, now that you got Blur Exterminator, StarX,
Yep.
NoiseX, Gradient X if you use it on Photoshop. I don't know, but I'm sure we'll get into that. And I don't know, why don't you just take it away and show us what you got? And
Okay, let me share my screen.
Sure.
Hopefully it will share the right screen. Okay.
There we go. And I'll make you
With
bigger.
luck, I'm sharing a screen and you should see me
With a mustache.
looks like I'm blinking.
Yeah, hold on a second.
Hey,
Let me see if I can get
I
that.
think that's a Photoshop image, isn't it?
It is. Want me to stop and start again?
Yeah, you are blinking a little bit. Yeah, it must be
Let's try this again.
still blinking.
Well, that's going to be distracting.
That's interesting. It might be your. Now you look like Wilson from from Home Improvement.
Let's see what happens
Try the first screen.
if I share the other screen.
Yeah.
Let me try this. That looks better.
And if you want to just F5 it or play slideshow.
Yep.
There we go. And I'll get
There we go.
I'll get the scrolly thing off there for you. And stickers, and there we go. And there you go.
Okay, and I assume you can hear me okay.
Yep, you're good.
Okay, well, let's jump in then. Kind of what I've put together for tonight is to start with a brief overview of my imaging process, and that's very brief. Then kind of an overview of my processing workflow, and a little bit of information about using Photoshop. And this is, a lot of people will probably already know all of this, but the idea is just to, for the people who are newcomers to Photoshop or have dabbled in it and didn't understand some of the workings, there's a little bit of information about that. And then I've got two examples kind of lined up to walk through. The first one is a simple one-shot color example using what I would do in PixInsight and then going into Photoshop. And then the second one is a monochrome narrowband that also includes RGB data. When I shoot monochrome narrowband, I almost always shoot red, green, and blue, primarily for the stars. And so we'll walk through that. It's a little bit more involved in PixInsight and Photoshop. So as you mentioned, I do all of my imaging from our observatory at Utah Desert Remote Observatories. The little observatory here at the top was our prototype that we built a couple of years ago. And the one on the bottom is our main observatory building that can house up to around 16 telescopes. The sky readings vary from night to night, but we're typically in the Bortle 1 to Bortle 3 range, depending on whether it's a good night or a bad night. We're seeing typically runs in the high 1s to low to mid 2 arcsecond range. For some reason, the last couple of nights we've been hanging around the 4 arcseconds, and I don't know if that's because of the scattered snow creating different thermals, but last couple of nights it's been terrible. We're at 5,100 feet elevation, and we're about 60 miles north of St. George. And again, we're at UtahDesertRemote.com. Imaging hardware, I have a Takahashi FSQ-106 on a Paramount MX Plus, and I have two cameras that I can switch back and forth between the two systems. A monochrome with basically the full set of monochrome filters, and then also the color version of that camera. It's also on a filter wheel. I mostly use either just a plain glass filter or an L-enhance, and the plain glass filter is only in there to give me some semblance of parfocal performance. Otherwise, the focus difference is just too great between the L-enhance and no filter. And that has a Orion mini guide scope on it. And notice in the picture here the zodiacal light. That was taken, I think, last January. The other setup is a kind of the baby beginner plane wave. It's a CDK 12.5, although I do like the focal length.
I love the way
That's
you
on
put baby beginner plane wave together.
I think it's the smallest thing they make. That's mounted on an ME2, and again, it can use the same cameras. In fact, we just swapped them back and forth yesterday. And I don't use an off-axis guider. I'm using a William Optic 81 millimeter as a guide scope. And it has worked out for me, and that avoids messing around with an off-axis guider and worrying about the rotation angle, because I do have rotators on both systems. And I just find it easy and effective to just use a guide scope. Probably not the way you're supposed to do it, but I've been getting by with it. I do pretty much all of my imaging sessions with Voyager. Occasionally I'll do something directly in the SkyX, but for the most part, I use Voyager for all of the sequence control. The SkyX provides mount control. I'm using PhD2 for auto guiding. And as the sequence is running overnight, it's just dropping the files into a Dropbox folder, and then those automatically get transferred to my computer at the house. So when I get up in the morning, I've got fresh files waiting for me, assuming the weather was cooperating. So my typical workflow, I watch the weather, configure the Voyager script, launch the programs. The observatories actually open automatically. And I have actually already done all this. The programs are running, but they're right now in suspend mode because clouds are keeping the observatory closed right now. But if it opens, they'll automatically take off. I'll go to bed, I'll get up, the observatory closes, and then I just run a little script to copy the files from the Dropbox folder onto their semi-permanent folder on my computer and start playing with them. So typically, if I'm shooting narrowband, I'll shoot sulfur, hydrogen, and oxygen for 600 seconds each, red, green, and blue at around 120 seconds each just for the stars. If I'm shooting RGB, I'll shoot RG and B, usually more like 300 seconds because that would be like a reflection nebula. If I'm using the one-shot color, I'll also use an L-enhance filter that's in that filter wheel for 600 seconds. And then darks, biases from the library. I'm pretty sloppy about flats. Apparently my systems are symmetrical enough that they don't really care about the rotation angle. So, for instance, I'm still using flats from September. And, I just don't pay attention to the rotation angle for the most part, unless it's something very special. And I will be the first to say I'm not very patient. And I tend to process images with too little data, go get more data and process them again.
You got a question, Craig.
Yeah.
Jerry RN, did you say that your observatory will start up overnight if the sky clears?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the roof is connected to a weather system, so it's monitoring the weather. And if the sky clears and it meets all the other parameters as far as wind and moisture and humidity and so forth, then the roof will open. And when the roof opens, that basically lets Voyager know that it's safe and it can continue running the sequence from wherever it left off. Or if time has moved forward and it should be in a different point in the sequence, it'll jump ahead. But The last I looked right now, it's just sitting in a kind of a suspend mode, waiting for the roof to open.
Nice.
Any other questions?
Just they want to know what are clouds.
No, the H2O nebula.
Yeah, exactly. Nope, that's it.
Okay. Yeah, just jump in and let me know if there's a question.
Yeah, if you want, I could actually put it on your screen. If you're seeing the live on YouTube, are you seeing that?
No, I'm not.
Hey, Craig, just for
Yeah.
the people that are just starting, you mentioned that with your RGB, that if you've got a one-shot color camera, that you'll shoot your L enhance for 600 seconds. Why would you push it up to 600 seconds? Because I think that the majority of those people would like to know why that would be the case. So could you just kind of maybe digress into that for just a little bit?
I don't know that I have an intelligent answer to that, other than it seems to work. And I'm kind of a creature of habit. I guess I did it once and it worked, so I just kept doing it.
Okay.
It's probably not a very good answer.
No. Okay, because I was going to suggest is that down the road we'll get an answer. But remember, we talked about these filters being interference filters. And so typically they'll only allow that wavelength of light to pass through. So that's consequently why you got to push it a lot longer in terms of exposure duration.
Yes. Yeah, and it as you'll see, when the L enhance is probably not the best dual narrowband filter. I think it's got a fairly wide band pass for hydrogen and oxygen. We have dark skies, so I can get by with, a cheaper filter. It creates some pretty nasty reflections from bright stars that I have to deal with in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see how I do that. But fortunately, the sample data I'm going to walk through tonight is not the best data.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope. Mark said it
Okay.
makes sense to me, and Tom said his driveway has been in suspend mode for 6 weeks.
So my basic workflow, and I'm going to start with the one-shot color because that's a little bit more straightforward. Basically, I start in PixInsight, and I didn't list it here, but really the first thing I do, and it's a very important step, is I'll step through all of the images in Blink and throw out any of the ones that have guiding errors or clouds or a bug landed on the telescope or whatever. But pull out the garbage frames before I proceed. And the way I do that in the Blink tool, you can just do a move. So move it from the main folder into a rejects folder. So I'm not actually deleting it. I'm just moving them into a rejects folder in case for some reason I want the garbage back. And then periodically I'll just purge that rejects folder. I'll set up WBPP to do the calibration and integration. Once that's done, I kind of step through the same rote process each time. I'll run a dynamic background extraction. With one-shot color, I'll do the new spectrophotometric color calibration on the plain RGB. I don't run that on the dual narrowband data.
Okay.
I'll run blur exterminator. I'll run a screen transfer function or a screen stretch, and typically I'll fiddle with the sliders on that a little bit to get the contrast I want, and then apply it with the histogram transformation tool, the way you do in PixInsight. I'll run noise exterminator, star exterminator, and I save the RGB stars and then save those files as 16-bit TIFFs. And that's really, for color, all I do in PixInsight.
You had another question from Kevin.
Yeah.
Why not just let WBPP throw out the trash?
I've tried that, and sometimes I do it just for the heck of it if I have a lot of data. I find that, and maybe I just get really nasty trash, but it seems like I get better results if I sort through it first. And I don't know if I'm more or less discerning than WBPP, but it just seems to work for me.
Gotcha.
And it seems like a tedious step, but in reality, it only takes a couple minutes to just, step through them one by one and pull out the ones that don't pass muster.
Got it.
Anything else?
Dylan wants to know what the weather is looking like in remote in desert in Utah.
The last time I looked, it was cloudy. We can take a peek. Let's see. Pull up our weather page here. The Astrospheric says it's going to be clear with decent transparency and modest seeing. The satellites show that we've got quite a bit of cloud cover coming down from the north, and it is cloudy. Then this top graph, you can see it's been cloudy pretty much all day. Anytime this blue squiggly line is in the gray, that means it's cloudy.
Gotcha.
And when it's down in the blue, that means it's clear. Winds are pretty calm, which is typical overnight. The winds will usually be very calm. Fairly humid, but no rain or snow, although the weather system doesn't really pick up snow. Seeing monitor and the sky quality meter haven't really kicked in yet. And if you look at the all-sky camera, there's the moon and there's the clouds. And there are a couple of stars peeking through.
I guess one of the things that came up, I guess, a couple of weeks ago regarding weather monitors. What are you using to get the weather information? Which device are you using?
I'm using the Sky Alert from Interactive Astronomy.
Okay.
And then that connects to their Sky Roof program that controls the roof opener.
Gotcha.
And cameras aren't picking up much. And then roof status, both roofs are closed. So that's the way it is.
Coming across here. Kevin Rasso asked, why stretch before noise exterminator?
I know generally the advice is to run noise exterminator and then stretch. Same with star exterminator. I just feel like I've had better results doing it this way. And I don't know if that's unique to my cameras or my idiosyncrasies in processing. It just seems like when I've tried it the other way, this works better for me. But that may be unique to my cameras.
Craig, I've got the 6200 mm also. Did you say that you're taking 600-second sub?
Yeah.
I think that was for the narrowband, for the L-enhanced, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Usually with the plain color is usually 120 or 300 seconds. And usually with red, green, and blue filters on the monochrome, I'm doing 120-second subs.
All right, cool. Yeah, we can move on to, I think that's
okay.
the last question.
Okay. And I have had people challenge me on saving at a 16-bit TIFFs that they're concerned I'm losing data and throwing away dynamic range.
Right.
I haven't found that to be the case. And that's really because I've already done most of the stretching that I'm going to do has already been done in PixInsight. And that's, I have found that's one of the things it does really, really well, and Photoshop does really, really poorly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you can do it in Photoshop, but it's a pain. So once I get into Photoshop, I load the files as layers, and we'll walk through exactly how we do that. And then I organize them into layer groups. And the reason I organize them into groups is partly just organizational, but also you can work on individual layers, and basically what happens in the group stays in the group and it doesn't affect the other layers. We'll put the stars in a group by themselves at the top of the layer stack, and using Star Exterminator, I removed the stars using the checkbox for unscreen the stars. So the technically proper way to put them back is through the screen blending mode. Clean up artifacts, and the examples we're working on today, the one-shot color in particular has a lot of artifacts to clean up. And then I'll use adjustment layers to brighten, darken, change color. I'll set a black point, which I've not seen anybody else do it the way I do, so that'll be kind of interesting. And when I get all done, I save it as a .psv, which is Photoshop's large document format. And that lets you save a document almost any size. And then you can load that saved document into Lightroom. And generally, I'll do any cropping or final adjustments to color, contrast, whatever, in Lightroom. And then from Lightroom, I'll export as a JPEG or whatever format I need to use. So at a high level, that's kind of what I do.
Okay.
Yep. So Craig, just a question. Using the one-shot color camera, what would you say would be the time duration for your post-processing techniques here from start to finish? Just just a ballpark idea. Are you saying maybe 2 hours,
Half hour.
3 hours, half hour? Yeah.
Half
Okay.
hour.
Half hour. Wow.
But, yeah, it's unless it's a real problematic image, and you'll see tonight, it'll go pretty fast.
Yeah, because I mean, I'll tell you, there are days where I spend a half an hour, or at least I used to spend a half an hour before Blur Exterminator came out. I spent a half an hour just deconvolving the photo.
And to be honest, before Blur Exterminator, I didn't bother with sharpening.
Okay.
I looked at the deconvolution in PixInsight and decided that's just not for me.
Yeah, it's definitely it's like fine wine, right, Pete?
I agree. You're right. I mean, you can obsess over post-processing. I mean, you can go OCD, but you're right. I mean, it's like if you can do it within, say, half an hour to 45 minutes, like Craig said, I think that's kind of really a good time frame to work with. But then again, you have to know the processing and you have to know the steps to do it.
Yeah, it's not going to be a push your dummy thing. It's really trial and error until and Greg, chime in on this. It's really dependent on your equipment. I mean, it changes on camera, on telescope, on it changes on every different type of rig on what you may be doing as far as settings are concerned.
Yeah, and I'm pretty fortunate. I've got a dark sky, good equipment, and especially good cameras. I mean, the 6200s are just beasts.
They're awesome. Unbelievable.
Yeah, so that I'm sure goes a long way towards the results. I also do this very iteratively. Remember, I said I save all of these layers as a large document. I'll look at that over time. Sometimes 20 minutes later, I'll look at it and say, oh, wow, I missed something, or I don't like that color, or I want to change the way the hydrogen is brought out. So I'll just reopen that document and go back and continue tweaking what's already there. So nothing is ever committed to a pixel until I actually output it from Lightroom. Everything else in here is all settings that you can go back and tinker with. One of the things I really like about Photoshop is, to me, it's a visual process as opposed to a kind of a numerical process. That I'm not putting factors into an equation and then run it and see what it looks like and then tweak the factors and run it again. Mm-hmm. I can see live previews as I move sliders to decide what looks best.
And you got one more question from my buddy Dave. Have you ever considered saving as a PNG as opposed to a JPEG, since JPEG contains less data and PNG is better for printing?
No, if I'm printing, I'll save it. I'll open it as a PSD file and full resolution and print from that. Usually a JPEG is for sharing on Facebook, and I want it to look good, but I don't want it. I don't care if it looks perfect.
Gotcha.
And PNGs are generally a lot larger.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
And with the large documents, I do run out of space. So I've got a NAS where I keep all of my backup files, and I usually just have my working files on the hard drives on my laptop.
Gotcha.
So I mentioned that this is a non-destructive, layer-based, non-destructive workflow. Non-destructive meaning that I maintain all the layers and adjustment layers intact, and I don't make a change that I can't undo or redo later. I generally don't care about file size. I figure that's what computer storage is for. I've got kind of a newish laptop. It's, I think, less than a year old, and it does have 128 gig of RAM. So it's fairly beefy. And I basically never flatten a file or merge layers, with just very rare exceptions.
And that's a good point that you brought up there, Craig, because why do you choose to do that? Just to be able to have the multitude of layers that you can always go in down the road later to post-process, right? Because you have that option in Photoshop to flatten it and to merge.
Right, and that does make the file a lot smaller, but I will always keep my master files, fully intact with all layers, because I get in a rush, I finish it, and then I look at it and see something I missed, and then go back. So for me, it's a very iterative process. I'm not the kind of person who can do it once and it's done perfectly. I have to sneak up on it. So it suits my way of working. And I would never say that this is the way you have to do it, or that you should use Photoshop instead of PixInsight. I see a lot of just beautiful work done in PixInsight. It's just that I don't know how to do it, and it doesn't work for me, but I know how to do it in Photoshop.
Hey, Craig, what would be your directory then? Would you have like a directory based, let's say the directory name would be on the target, correct? And then would you have subdirectories underneath that based upon the layers, based upon
Yep.
a multitude of different
and
things?
Would
you
in
be
fact,
able
we
to
can
show?
talk about that. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, when we get into
right.
the examples, I can show that. Anything else?
Dave had one more question regarding monitor calibration.
Yep.
You
It's
calibrate
important.
your monitor, and if you do,
Yep.
what do you use?
I use a Color Monkey.
Okay.
They've been around for 10 years or longer. One thing to be cautious of, any calibration like that, they focus on color calibration and not brightness calibration. And what they're really doing is creating a profile. Calibration is getting a standard brightness set, and what I use to set my brightness is a gray step that I know I've printed it out, so I know when that file is printed properly, how muddy the dark side gets and how much separation you can see on the bright side and the dark side, and about how it should lay. And so I will adjust the brightness and contrast on my monitor based on that. And I use the Color Monkey primarily to wrangle the colors.
Have you had any
But
experience with the SpiderX that came up a couple times in the chat?
no, from my understanding is it does basically the same thing as the Color Monkey. Some of the better software will give you an option to set your brightness level.
Yep.
Most monitors are set too bright. So I have mine set at around 90 candelas. Was it candelas per meter squared, I think,
Yep.
is the
CMS,
the actual. And if you don't step in and tell the software you want something different, it will probably put you somewhere in the 110 to 120 range, which is so bright you'll be making your image dark, and then when other people look at it, they wonder why it's so dark.
Gotcha.
So if you make prints and the prints come out too dark, that's probably because your monitor is too bright.
There you go. All right.
Another good tip is to look at your picture against both a white background and a black background. And if it looks kind of equally good or equally bad against both a white and a black background, then it's probably kind of in the ballpark.
Dave's knocking them out of the park as usual. He's like, I assume you share using the sRGB space.
Yes.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah, I
doesn't
do.
well,
In fact, I do most of my Astro work I do in sRGB from PixInsight on.
From the ICC. Yeah.
and if I'm not mistaken, sRGB, that's good for being able to put up on a monitor. But if you're doing printing, would you not want to look at like the Pro Photo RGB or something along those lines?
Generally not. Depends on how you're printing. There are no monitors or printers that can display or output a Pro Photo color space. It's so large, there's no device that can handle it. So you run the risk of having problems in your image that are colors that your monitor can't display, so you can't see them. So it's kind of like, you know, trying to do color correction with blue tinted glasses on.
Mhm.
The
Makes
Adobe
sense.
RGB is good if you're printing on a kind of a high-end dot matrix printer, like a large Epson printer. If you're sending your files off to be printed somewhere like, you know, MPix or Bayphoto or somewhere like that, their processes are designed around sRGB. And in fact, their printing equipment, that's kind of their limit in color gamut is sRGB. So if you stay in sRGB from the beginning, it just kind of keeps you from getting in trouble anywhere. If you start in a larger color space, at some point it's going to get reduced and crammed into something smaller, and you may not get the result you want.
All right. That's the last one, I think, for now.
Okay. Good questions.
No, there's going to be a lot. You know, we have a very, very outspoken crowd here, as you know. So,
Well, that's good. That's good. We haven't even gotten into the meat of it yet. This is
Nope.
just the preamble.
Yep.
So non-destructive, I use adjustment layers. I keep individual layers intact. And one thing you can use rather than flattening something is to use a smart object that encapsulates all of the layers into one thing that you can then work on. But basically just never flatten an image or merge layers. I keep talking about layers, and for those who are new to Photoshop, layers are kind of the basic construct of a Photoshop document. When you're looking at the Photoshop window, the layout I use is basically the Essentials workspace that you can select from the workspace menu. I have the properties panel at the top, the adjustment layers in the middle, so I can quickly grab like a hue saturation or levels or curves or something. And then the bottom is the layers panel. So each one of these things you see here with the thumbnail are individual layers. And if we zoom in this case, they happen to be a layer that contains the blue filter information, one that contains the green, and one that contains the red. But they could contain stars and background or anything. They're just layers. I said they're the fundamental part of Photoshop, and the layer stack is where you see them, or the layers palette is where you see your layers. And you can think of it like a stack of paper, and the one you see is the one on top. And normally you don't see what's below it. But there are tools called blending modes that tell Photoshop how you want the layer that it's on to interact with those that are below. So I mentioned earlier that the stars are in screen blending mode. That's one of these tools that allows just the bright pixels to show through and not the dark pixels. So it just kind of automatically puts in the stars without affecting anything else. There's really two types of layers. There are pixel-bearing layers and adjustment layers. Pixel-bearing layer, that's your image, or layers that contain your image. So each pixel has red, green, and blue values, and it's that mix of red, green, and blue that makes color. Layers are normally opaque. And generally, if you're pursuing a non-destructive workflow, you want to avoid doing anything to directly change the pixels. You don't want to brighten or darken the layer. You don't want to use a clone stamp on the layer and so forth. Adjustment layers are things that adjust what you're looking through. So it's like looking through a pair of glasses. They don't contain pixels. All they do is affect what you see below that adjustment layer. And they're really one of the keystones of non-destructive editing. And the beauty is when you save a layered document, those adjustment layers are saved along with the most recent setting for brightness, contrast, color, whatever. So that when you reopen the document, it comes back with those settings that you were using still intact, so you can go back and tinker with them some more. But they don't change the pixel, they only change the look of the pixel. One of the tools you'll see me use a lot is the script to load files into Stack. That's something that just comes as a standard part of Photoshop, and it lets you load multiple files, and it opens each file into its own stack. Oh, I just got a message that the roof will open in 20 minutes. We'll see if it does.
Nice.
Masks are also an important part of Photoshop, although somewhat less useful for astro processing, that you could go through a complete workflow and never use a mask. Or you may, but most of the time they're not as important as they might be for terrestrial photography. But a layer mask lets you hide some or all of a layer and or its effect. So if it's a pixel bearing layer, it hides those pixels either completely or just partially. If it's an adjustment layer, it will partially or completely hide that effect of that adjustment layer. So painting black on a mask hides that layer or its effect. And then white on a mask reveals what's there. So rather than erasing part of a layer, you can hide it with a mask. Just paint on black instead of erasing. And if you went too far, just switch to white and paint with white, and it restores what you inadvertently hid by painting with black. And again, masks are saved with the document, so they're reversible. There are just a brief talk about color channels. You'll see I don't really use channels directly in my workflow. I cringe every time I see somebody create a duplicate file and then copy and paste the channels. That we're not going to do that. But there are two kinds of images. There's a grayscale image that looks black and white, and it only has one channel, gray. That's all it has. An RGB image is made up of 3 color channels, and those are the red, green, and blue values that you see as the pixels. So if you look at a pixel, you see the red, green, and blue values of the channel at that point. But you can also look at just the red channel, just the green channel, just the blue channel. So each layer contains all 3 of the red, green, and blue channels. But anytime red, green, and blue are all equal, then the color is neutral. In other words, there's no color to it. So 0, 0, 0 would be black. 128, 128, 128 would be a medium gray. And 255, 255, 255 would be white. Generally, the actual values are much greater than that. If you're working in 16-bit, you're going to have big numbers, but we usually talk about them in 8-bit terms of 0 to 255. An RGB monochrome image has equal values of red, green, and blue everywhere, so it looks like a black and white image, but it's actually color. It has all 3 channels. It's just that they're equal. Therefore, it looks gray. And that'll be important as we get into Photoshop later. If you have a grayscale image and you want to convert it to a color image, the way you do that is to go to Image, Mode, and under Mode, you can see this one is selected as grayscale. You would just click on RGB color, and that will switch the mode from RGB to grayscale or back and forth. If you switch from grayscale to RGB color, it will create those 3 color channels for you and set them all equal. If you go the other way, it will throw out the RGB channels and just leave you with 1. And sometimes you may notice a little bit of a shift from grayscale to color that has to do with the way the color spaces are defined. So it's good to do that early on. You will see me use some keyboard shortcuts. I don't use a lot of them. Tapping the V key will activate the move tool to move things around. B will activate the brush tool for painting on a mask, for instance. The D key will swap the foreground and background colors, which are usually black and white. I'm sorry, D will set the default foreground colors to black and white. X will swap between foreground and background. The left and right bracket keys will make the brush larger and smaller. Control J will copy a layer, just duplicates it, or a layer group. Control G will create a layer group from the selected layers. Shift Control U will desaturate a layer, take all the color away. And if you do feel like you need to merge, if you do a Shift Control Alternate E, so basically the whole left side of the keyboard, that will merge everything below the selected layer into a new layer. But that's a destructive step, so usually you don't want to do that. And it's destructive because once you start tinkering with that merged layer, you can't undo it. I mentioned layer groups that help keep you organized. So here we've put the red, green, and blue layers. So each one is in its own layer group. And again, the reason for doing that is whatever I do to, for instance, if I put a levels adjustment on this blue layer, then it will only affect the blue. It won't affect the things below it because what happens in the layer stays in the layer. It's kind of like Las Vegas. We talked about adjustment layers. One you'll see a lot is a levels adjustment layer. Adjustment layers, when you create them, automatically come with a mask that's automatically filled in with white. That's the little icon to the right. And actually, if you work on the mask, you'll see it reflected on the icon, the little thumbnail here. And then the little kind of yin-yang symbol shows you that there's an adjustment layer there. And you can work on either the adjustment layer or the mask of the adjustment layer. So you want to make sure that you have it'll be obvious to you. If you don't see the controls, then you're working on the layer mask instead of the adjustments itself. This levels adjustment works basically like a histogram transformation in PixInsight. So layer-based non-destructive is a better way of working. It's fast, easy, flexible, and I think it yields better results because you can change your mind and go back and fix things that you may have not seen at the beginning, and you can do that very easily without starting over. Fast supports layer adjustments. I don't need to spend a lot of time on this, other than say you can easily add additional data, especially if you use the same reference frame in PixInsight for day 2, day 3, day 4 of your data. Then you can just, as long as you haven't done any cropping, you can just very easily combine data. So this would be a good time for questions. Otherwise, we'll jump into an example of one-shot color using the L-Enhance filter and try to turn this into this.
Ooh. No questions so far. Just some comments in the chat. They're talking about the asteroid coming by that's gonna skim the Earth at, what is it, 2,700 miles or something like that.
So with luck, I'm going to start PixInsight, and hopefully my computer won't blow up.
And
I have already processed this, obviously. Yeah. Question?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Like I said, normally the first thing I would do is go into the image inspection and blank. And I have 2 hard drives on my computer. And on my D drive is where I save everything I'm working on. And then the C drive is where I save it after I'm done working on it. So I go to the Astro folder, and I have data coming in from 2 different systems that have NUCs on them. So they're cleverly named NUC 1 and NUC 2. And the data we're going to look at is from NUC 2. and it's actually from the jellyfish. So this is where I've stored the various nights of data from the jellyfish. And if I wanted to go through these in the inspection, I would just quickly open up I won't open them all, open them up in Blink. It's unhappy about something.
Yep. I think you opened them all
So
up.
maybe we won't do this.
You opened them all up and not in the Blink program, I think.
Okay. Now let me just close all.
There you go.
And missed.
There you go.
So thank you for catching that.
No problem.
We'll try this.
There you go.
That looks a little bit more reasonable. No, still doesn't like something.
Oh,
Okay,
wow,
we
look at
won't. The term demonstration, I'm told, comes from a Greek word that means fails before large audiences.
that. There you go.
So this is a
Works for me.
demonstration. So typically, I would have gone through these in Blink and then loaded the remaining files into WBPP. And do we need to look at WBPP, you think?
Just a really quick over, if you want.
Okay.
You don't have to go crazy. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube about it, I think.
Yeah, and it's kind of a nice one-stop shop. Looks like this was set up for narrowband data. Generally, I load my lights first, and then I can double check what my exposure times were. And you just load the files that you want by clicking on the Files button down here, and it will open up a dialog to select the files. So I can see here I've got red, green, blue, hydrogen, and I need flats for 120 seconds and 600 seconds and 300 seconds. So I'll go load my flats. If I look at my file structure within Nook 2, I have a folder called Flats. And most of the time I'm using these flats from September 24th. So I would just go in here and pick the flats that I want. And then the same way with darks, I've got my Astro, since I have 2 cameras and 2 systems, the calibration darks and flats are in a separate folder. So I've got color camera and monochrome camera. Under monochrome camera, I've got my darks and my bias files. So I would just pick the darks and biases from here. And then go through the calibration tab settings. And one of the important factors here is the pedestal. I use a pedestal of around 300, and that seems to avoid problems. If it's the first time I'm running it, I'll use auto mode for registration. If I'm running data that I ran the day before, I'll actually go back to the log file and see what frame was chosen as the reference frame and switch this to manual and select a reference image down here so that I get the same registration that I had the night before. And my output directory is generally in this PI swap files folder, and I back up the Astro folder. I don't back up this one. So these are considered kind of throwaway. And that's where PixInsight writes and rewrites and copies files. And once all that's done, you hit run and go get a cup of coffee.
There you go.
And after it's done its magic, we can go look at this swap files. And let's go to the jellyfish. And you've got all of these files here. The one you want is master. And within master, the two that we want are the luminosity and the L enhance. So it jumped the gun. So there's the L enhance. So I'll just go ahead and open both of them.
Yep.
So there are the two files that came out of WBPP. The icons up here let you control the automatic screen stretch so that you can see what's there. And you kind of have to keep track of whether what you're seeing is real or whether what you're seeing is just a stretched representation of what's there. And one way you can tell is if I look at the file name over here on the right, you can see that it's just black. If I do the screen stretch, or the STF auto stretch, I think is what the tooltip calls it, it will stretch the image, and then you'll see a little green bar over here. That tells us that we're looking at an auto stretch image. This doesn't look quite like the color I want. I've got some saved icons on the right. Generally, the very first thing I'll do is a dynamic background extraction, which I've already saved with these, fairly large samples all the way around the perimeter. And I'll just glance quickly to see if it's going to be picking up any significant nebula or super bright stars, or otherwise I'll just leave those where they are. This was something I picked up off of Sean's website. So basically everything is already set. So I just hit the execute button. It's done its magic, so I can close that and redo the stretch. And this is a linked stretch, so now it looks better. The next thing I would do, since this is the L enhance, I won't do the color calibration. So I would use blur exterminator, which I'm not going to take the time to do. Then the next step would be to actually stretch the image. So I would click on the STF icon and also the histogram transformation. And this is where I might tinker with the settings. If I'm using the scroll wheel on the mouse to zoom in here on the sliders, and I can adjust the dark level using the left slider, or the brightness if I want to make it brighter or darker with this slider. Once I get it where I want, the PixInsight secret code is you grab the triangle from here, drag it down to the bottom section of the histogram transformation, and that copies the settings, and then click the square to apply that, and the image turns white because now we have stretched the image, and if you see the green bar, we're still auto stretching it. So I can turn off the screen stretch or auto stretch with this icon, and now that's what the file actually looks like. So my last two steps would be to run noise exterminator and star exterminator. And when I do that, let me pull in what I've already saved here. That's what I end up with. So that's after it's been stretched and star exterminated and blur exterminated. And you can see there's a lot of artifacts here that we'll have to clean up. But at this point, I would save this image as a 16-bit TIFF. And then I would go through basically the same thing with the RGB file. I would do dynamic background extraction to get something that looks a little more correct. And then, since this is the RGB color, I will do a spectrophotometric color calibration to get the star colors kind of right. And then step through, we'll do the screen stretch more or less the same way, although I do want to make sure on this one that I do it with a linked stretch, because we've, after I've gone to the trouble of color calibrating, I don't want to change the colors. So again, I can adjust it. And since I'm mostly looking for stars, I will usually, on this one, I'll usually turn up the star sharpness in in blur exterminator. And I'll process this one a little on the dark side to help minimize the stars and give me a fighting chance at having small stars. And then again, do the magic dance of drag the triangle down to the histogram transformation, apply that, and turn off the screen stretch so you can see what the file actually looks like. And when that is done, I wind up with two files. I'll wind up with the stars that we've extracted using the unscreen option in Star Exterminator, and a luminosity layer that again shows a lot of artifacts. In reality, there's not much I want from this image. It'll be mostly built from the L-enhanced data. But if we look in here, there's some reflection nebula here, and then a larger area down here that don't show up in the L-enhanced data. So we will bring in some of this from the RGB file to add some seasoning to the L-enhanced data. So at this point, I would save these two files as 16-bit TIFFs, and at that point, I'm done in PixInsight and ready for Photoshop. Any questions before we jump ahead?
Nope, just some comments about the STF. Good tip on the sliders. Let's see. It looks like I could follow Craig's instructions very well, although I'm terribly disinterested in computers. He seems to make this very easy. I guess that's a good thing. So
yeah. If you've been playing with computers for long enough, it's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
I feel sorry for people who are coming into this without a computer or a photography background.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot larger of a learning curve, definitely.
Yes. So I guess at this point, I'm just going to get out of PixInsight because I don't want to, my computer's been misbehaving lately, so I don't want to overtax it. So we'll just close all this and go into Photoshop. So the first thing I need to do in Photoshop is load these files as layers, if you were paying attention earlier. So I go to the File menu, Scripts, Load File Stack, and some of this stuff pops up on my other monitor, so I have to drag it over. This is the load layers dialog box. Click on Browse, and that will give us the option to choose the files we want to load. So we're working on the jellyfish, and I want the stars, I want the RGB, and I want the unlinked stretch of the L-enhance. I'll just click OK. So now the three files are listed. Click OK again, and you'll see those files come in and populate the three layers over on the right-hand side. And the order may or may not come in the order you want. It happened to put the stars on top, which is good, then the luminosity, and then the L-enhance. So actually, that's the order that we're going to work in. So that worked out. I'll start with Craig, a little housekeeping. Yeah.
Well, Craig, just before you go, if by chance, if the order isn't what you want, you can just drag and move the order, correct?
Yep, just click and drag and put it wherever you want it. Good question. I like to put my layers into groups. So the highlighted layer here, the dark layer, is the one that's highlighted, and that's the stars layer. And the nice thing about this, it comes in with the file name. If I just I can put layers into a group using the group icon in the tooltip says create a new group, although you probably can't read that at the bottom. Since I do this so often, it's one of the few shortcuts I use, and that's Control-G. If I double click on the group name here, it just by default is just group 1. I'll just double click and change that to stars. And I know I'm going to add a levels adjustment and a hue saturation. So I'll just go ahead and add those right now. I can choose those from this adjustments panel that's in the middle of the Essentials workspace. So if I click on levels, it'll add the levels adjustment and then hue saturation. And those two adjustment layers are now there. Levels is really handy to use. In fact, we'll add it to pretty much every layer group. With stars, it's kind of magical because you can make the stars smaller or bigger just by moving that center slider back and forth in the panel at the top. So you want small stars, you want big stars, you want something in between. And you can also use the hue saturation to get more saturated or less saturated stars. And since these are in a layer group, they're not affecting anything below. They're only affecting the stars. The last thing we need to do with stars is change their blending mode from normal, or pass through is how it defaults for a group, in this drop down at the top of the layers panel. So if I just click the drop down, it'll give me a list of blending modes that I can use. And the one we want is screen. And notice now we see through it and we can see in this case, we're looking at the RGB or the luminosity data below it. And if we go back to this levels, I just clicked on the little icon on the levels adjustment layer, come back to my slider, and now we can get a better feeling for how big or small do we want the stars, and how saturated or unsaturated do we want them compared to the background.
I got one question here from Dave.
Yeah.
Instead of screen mode, have you ever tried linear dodge to add the stars?
I have. Linear dodge is a little bit more aggressive. Another one that I use a lot is lighten blending mode. In the old days of StarNet, you would subtract the stars, and then the right way to put them back in was to add them back. With Star Exterminator's unscreen process, the technically correct way to put them back in is with a screen transfer or blending mode. If we use lighten, it's a lot less aggressive. So that just by itself makes the stars smaller. The problem is if you use lighten blending mode, any place you have bright nebula behind it, it can overpower the stars, where screen will always show the star even if it's if there's something bright behind it.
What would happen if you
I
hit
almost
soft?
always use screen. Yeah.
Craig, what would happen if you hit overlay or soft? I'm just kind of curious just to see what it would look like.
That's overlay. It's going to overlay in soft light because I'm going to alt click on the eyeball. You can turn layers or layer groups off and on with this eyeball. If I hold the alternate key and click on a layer or a layer group, it'll solo just that one layer. So if we look at the stars, they're basically on a pure black background. And in soft light blending mode, black will darken what's below it. And if I alt click on the eyeball again, it turns everything that was on back on again. So for now, let's just turn off the stars because they just get in the way. Next is the RGB. I'm just going to quickly Control G to put that into a group. Click to change the name. And I'm just going to automatically add a levels adjustment. It's going to need more work, but we'll come back to it later. This is really where we want to spend most of our time, is on the L-enhanced data. Again, Control G to drop it into a group. Double click to change the name. And now I'm just going to go ahead and throw a levels adjustment layer in because I'm sure we're going to use it. The first thing we need to do is clean up all of these really nasty reflections. And not only are there reflections, there are halos around the reflections that I like to neutralize. And we've got a lot of just kind of nasty stuff out here in the corners in front of what's mostly just dark sky. That there's not much of interest that was captured in this data. Like I said, this is not the best data. So that's not necessarily bad for a demonstration. Because I want to work on this non-destructively, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to add a blank layer, and I can just click on the new layer icon at the bottom, and that will add a blank layer above whatever the selected layer was, and then automatically it's selected. And then the tool I'm going to choose over on the left-hand side, under the healing tools, I'm going to choose the healing brush tool. And there's two that you can use. There's the healing brush and the spot healing brush. Spot healing brush works well for things like satellite trails. For larger areas like this, the healing brush is a more gentle and does a better job of blending in. It's much better than the clone stamp, which is a very kind of a harsh, blunt tool. The healing brush uses some the automatic content generation to match not only the texture of what's there, but the texture that you're copying from, and blends it in so that it looks good. One of the nice things, if you look at the tool settings at the top, it's set to current and below. So what that means is it's going to sample from wherever I tell it to sample from, but it's going to put the result on this layer by itself, and it's going to sample from this layer and whatever's below. So the end result is all of my edits will be on this currently blank layer that I can then turn on and off. So to see how that works, let's just pick one simple one right here. Let's say I want to remove this. So I've got the healing brush. I'm on the blank layer. I have current and below selected. I will hold the alternate key down. You can see the cursor changes, and that's where I'm sampling from. So I click to choose a sample source, move over what I want to eliminate. I can use the left and right bracket keys to make it larger or smaller, and just kind of click and paint, and it's gone. But what it did was put the spot to fix it on a layer by itself. So I can turn this layer on and off and either reveal that star or hide that star. And then it's just a matter of going around, working with this, current and below, cleaning up all these nasty spots. And the ones that are kind of out here in the boundary and near the borders, I'm being, pretty sloppy about. I'm just trying to make them go away. When we get into ones that have more detail, then I may take more time. Some things like this spot, I will try to sample, make my cursor a little smaller, and I want to sample from this area that looks like it is kind of a continuation of what should be there. So I'll pick that as my sample point, and then when I move down, I'll keep it aligned and paint that out. And so it blends in from the source area. And then back to some of these big areas. Like I said, a lot of these I'm just quickly trying to get rid of the really nasty things. And most of this area is going to be just black when we get done anyway. And I'll make my disclaimer here that I approach this, I guess, as a visual artist rather than a astronomer. Mm-hmm. So I don't worry too much about trying to maintain the integrity of the scientific integrity of an image. So pretty quickly we're down to just these two really big bright stars, and they're going to be a little bit more problematic. The problem is, as you start to fix it, it leaves a glow around it. So I'll try to, blend that in the best I can with surrounding nebula, and same thing over here. But we're going to have to do something else to fix this before we're done. And Pete, you brought up the soft light blending mode. That's what we're going to use to fix this. If these weren't so bad, I would do all of the repairs with a soft light blending mode. What we're going to do is selectively just darken and brighten areas through a process that's usually referred to as burning and dodging in the photo world. And to do that, I'm going to create another blank layer so that I can make my adjustments on this blank layer. I'm going to go to the brush tool, which I can tap B to go to the brush tool. And again, I can use left and right bracket keys to make it larger and smaller. These two squares show the default colors. If there's something other than the default colors, for instance, it's like that, I can tap D, and that will give me the default colors. X will just quickly switch between black and white as my foreground color. So black darkens, white lightens. And we'll put this layer in soft light blending mode. And the last thing I'll do is look at my brush opacity, and I want it to be fairly low. I can use numeric shortcuts. It's at 10% right now. If I tap the 4 key, it'll go to 40%. 0 would go to 100%. 10 goes to 10%. If I hit 0, 5 quickly, it would go to 5%, and so forth. But we'll start at 10%, and what I want to do is just paint with black on this soft light layer to darken this area that's too bright and try to blend it in with the surroundings. So I'll just start painting, and you can see that it's not changing anything. It's just darkening what's there. And a lot of times when you have glare reflections, it's not that you don't want to change what's there. You certainly don't want to use the clone stamp to change it. You just want to darken the details that are there so it doesn't stand out. So I'm just painting with a big soft brush with 10% opacity and darkening that so it blends in better. And I can turn this layer on and off to see the effect I've had. And that also will help you see areas that maybe need additional attention. If you go too far, like I just did here, and it got too dark, I just tap the X key to shift to white and then paint white to lighten that back up. And then we'll do the same thing over here. Go to make sure I have black as my color, and I'm just clicking, and each time I click, it adds 10%. And blend this in. And you may want a little bit of a glow around that star, or you may not. That's entirely up to you. It's kind of like happy trees. It's up to you.
Well, Bob Ross.
Yep. So, that's a pretty quick cleanup. We've got a lot of stuff out here that looks pretty nasty. Let's go to the levels adjustment layer. And if we look at the histogram, you can see the black slider on the left, and that kind of controls where we clip to black. The white slider is on the right, and you can see we're not clipping anything white, and we're also really not clipping anything on the black side. And the center slider is just an overall gamma or brightness. If I slide the black slider over, it'll start to darken the whole image, and you can darken that background so it looks a little bit less obtrusive. We can also brighten the highlights until we're just short of, just almost to clipping something. And we can move the center slider and just iteratively kind of go back and forth until we get the nebula looking about the way we want it. And now one of my secrets for dealing with this background area that is basically just kind of a mottled ugly mess, and we didn't really get any good data there. And I'm sure people are cringing as I do this. I'm going to just kind of paint this dark black. But as we talked before, I don't want to paint on it. So what I'm going to do is add a solid color fill layer. So if you come down to the bottom of the Photoshop window, there's kind of a yin-yang symbol. Yep. If I click on that, you can also choose adjustment layers from here. And one that's only here is solid color. So I'll select that. And I like my backgrounds to be somewhere in the range of like 19, 20, 21 RGB. And since RG and B are equal, that's going to be a neutral black. And that's kind of a nice, happy amount of black. Click OK. Trouble is, it's on top of everything else, so everything is just turned black. Again, we have our blending modes to the rescue. I'm going to go to my blending modes and choose lighten. And I don't know if you can see what that kind of magically did.
Yeah.
Any place that was darker than 2020, it brought it up to 2020, so it kind of created a floor, a darkness floor. Anything brighter just shines through. If I turn that off and on, you can see the difference.
Nice.
Yep, look at that.
So, you know, all this noisy crap in the background is gone. Since it's non-destructive, now we can double click on the thumbnail and adjust this up or down to find what's really kind of the ideal place. And since we have some stuff like the glare around the star here and some of this noise showing through, we'll just go back to our burn and dodge layer, that soft light layer. And if I paint with on here, it's going to pull it down so it goes black. I might choose to hide some of this. And at this point, I might choose to highlight some areas. This burn and dodge can also be used creatively. If I paint with white, I can highlight some areas. And if you want to really create contrast, you can add contrast by painting alternately with, for instance, paint with dark on a kind of dark area, and then white on a kind of light area. And that creates more local contrast and better brings out those features. So, you know, this is, you know, very much an iterative playing around with it process. But we've got this looking kind of okay. If we turn the stars on, that's what it looks like with stars. Stars look a little bit too bold, so we'll turn them down a little bit. Let's turn that off. We haven't done anything with our RGB data, and it, again, looks pretty mottled and bad, but what we really want is just this reflection nebula here and here. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to go to our RGB group, and I'm going to click on the disclosure triangle to expand it. We already have a levels adjustment layer that we put in earlier, so I'll use it to darken most of the background and then brighten the highlights to really bring out the contrast in those reflection nebula areas. And I'm really just focused on what's happening here and a little bit up here and ignoring the rest of it. Because the next thing I'm going to do is come up to the layer group, and I'm going to go to this icon that looks like a front-loading washer that says Add Layer Mask. And I'm going to click on that to add a layer mask to this group. You can see the little thumbnail just popped in. Right now it's white, so it's revealing everything in this group, and I want to invert it to black. Easiest way to do that is just to invert the mask, and the keyboard shortcut is Control-I. That will turn the mask black and hide everything. Now I'll just grab my trusty brush tool, tap 0 for 100% opacity. We're painting with white, so we're going to start bringing stuff back and revealing stuff that's in this group. And there we just brought back that reflection nebula. Since it has its own adjustment layer, I can adjust how bright I want the brightness to be and how dark I want the dark to be. If there's areas I don't want to reveal, I just go back to the mask, switch to the black, and hide it. And that's all there is to it.
Oh.
Turn the stars back on, and Bob's your uncle.
Wow.
The last thing we might want to do is come back to the L-Enhance data. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the levels layer. I want to stay below this black fill layer. And let's just add a hue saturation layer and pump up the color a little bit. If we wanted to change the color, we could use a color balance adjustment to tweak the color to be more red, more blue, more green, whatever color you'd like. And that's all there is to it.
That's
So
amazing.
it,
That's
notice I haven't cropped anything.
no.
I don't
I
use the
see.
dynamic crop tool. At this point, I would save this image as a PSB, and you do that by doing File, Save As, and change it to large document format, and give it a name and save it wherever you save your master files. And then I would import that saved master file into Lightroom, and that's where I would do my final cropping and color adjustments, things like that. I might add some sharpening or noise reduction in Lightroom. So that's kind of the basics of a simple one-shot color workflow. And what'd that take, a half hour?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. We started
Yep.
just about 10 o'clock. Yep.
With me babbling on.
That's
No.
pretty amazing. You know, I love the fact that with Photoshop, you're able to kind of control, like what you did with the that reflection nebula in the middle there. You know, that you just painted it with a little bit of dark, and you were able to kind of just, it kind of just like laid a mask on there, and you were able to kind of just raise and lower the brightness of that one little section. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, in fact, there is a mask, right here. And that's,
There
if
it
you're
is.
curious, that's what the mask looks like.
Yep.
I did that just by alt-clicking on the mask itself. We can turn this whole layer group on and off to see its effect. And sometimes when you do that, something will jump out at you that doesn't look right.
Right.
If you're on a starless image, we just turn the stars off.
Hey,
Pretty,
Craig, if you
pretty
were,
straight.
if you're going to consider
Yeah.
using like a high pass procedure on this, what layer of the or what group would you put the high pass on?
Good question. I would probably put it just below the stars. And so this is one of those instances where I would do a Shift Control Alternate E. So I just turned off the star layer because we don't want it included. And I've currently selected the top layer of stuff that we do want included, and then do the Shift Control Alt E. If you remember, that is a stamp visible. So that creates a fixed pixel bearing layer that is the composite of everything below it. So that's what it looks like. For a high pass, you don't want to have color on it. So Shift Control U, desaturate with one of the keyboard shortcuts. We take all the color out. And typically, you would go ahead and put this in soft light blending mode, and then go to, and I'm actually going to duplicate this now that we've got it to this point, and you'll see why in a minute. Then I'll go to Filter, Other, High Pass Filter. And you can use this two different ways. If you use it with a relatively small pixel radius, I should have zoomed in before I did this, but it's basically just sharpening and adding some acutance to the fine details in the jellyfish. And with my setup, somewhere usually in the 8 to 15 pixel radius works pretty well.
Okay.
Click OK, and now we've just done some detailed sharpening, and I can turn that layer off and on, and you can see the effect.
Oh, wow, look at that.
I mean, that would be basically Photoshop's equivalent to Blur Exterminator, correct?
I would think it's pretty close.
Well, it's actually doing sharpening where Blur Exterminator is doing deconvolution. So there is a difference. Now, the other way you can use this, and that's why I made a copy of this. Let's go to this copy that I made here. And it's the same thing. It's a gray layer in soft light blending mode. So let's go to Filter, Other, High Pass. And if we crank this pixel radius up quite a bit, as you start cranking it up, it looks worse. And then it starts to look better again. And when you get to really high values, like 200, 300 pixels, it starts to add what's called local contrast. And it's creating big blurs. That's darkening the dark areas and brightening the bright areas, and that's contrast when you have darker darks and brighter brights. If I turn this off and on,
Yep, look at
it's
that.
a little too strong. And if the effect is too strong, you just go up to this opacity slider, and you can drop down and move the slider, and just adjust it to taste. And it's a good idea to turn it off and on. I'm working on a black background, so I can see that my background is dark but not black. I can switch to, I have a custom background that's white. Look at it against a white background. Or the default I have set as a gray background. So that lets me judge 3 different ways of looking at it. For instance, Facebook shows it against a white background. If you print, you're basically printing it on a white background. So it's you want to have it look good in both scenarios.
So just out of curiosity now, can we see the specs on this particular file now in terms of what is the data in terms of megapixels that with the different groups and the layers?
Document size is 2.3 gig.
Okay.
If I flattened it, it would be 350 megabytes. It's 2.3 gig as it currently stands.
Yep. And would that be typical with the amount of what you've got here on the right side with the layers and the groupings?
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are going to be bigger than that. 4 to 5 is probably more typical, sometimes 8.
Wow. Okay.
I did a 12-panel mosaic of the Orion area, and I think it tipped the scales around 15.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, man.
But I think if I printed it at 300 pixels per inch, it would be 16 feet wide.
Oh my God.
Yep. So Craig, would it be advantageous, yes or no, would it be advantageous to save it as one file as a PNB and then another file as a TIFF? Would there be any reason to consider both of those saving formats?
I don't think so, because I only want one master file, and having 2 master files is a little bit like having 2 calendars. They'd be the same.
Okay.
So I save a master file as a PSB, and I kind of preserve it as the master file. Anything I want to do from that master file, I'll create exports from Lightroom. So for instance, if you called me up and say, hey, can you send me a TIFF file? Then I would export it as a TIFF from Lightroom to create that.
Okay.
If I want to put a JPEG on Facebook, I'll export it as a small JPEG from Lightroom.
That's an amazing process. I mean, it's super quick. It was easy, well, easier than I thought it was going to be, because I've always been the one that, I just learned PixInsight, and, even though the Photoshop has been around light years before PixInsight has been there, PixInsight is what I learned on. And, to see the functionality of Photoshop live, it makes me think maybe, I might jump the shark and actually give it a shot.
Well, as they say, you ain't seen nothing yet, because we haven't done the monochrome workflow.
No.
So if we're done with this,
I don't do color, because I'm in Bortle 8.5. So I don't I don't do one-shot color. I mean, I did my last project, I'm still not done with it yet, was M42, and I ended up taking, because I pushed the camera to its limit, I think, in New York City. I actually got up to about 30-second subs, and and that was the limit that I could do, seriously, in New York, because it was just getting, the whole background was getting blown out. And I took a little bit less than 1,200 30-second subs with a Red Cat. And I actually had to change the settings and I had to integrate it manually, because WBPP continued to crash. because it was so many lines of information that it wouldn't go past like the last third of the photograph. It wouldn't get down to the last couple rows, so it would crash all the time. So I actually had to integrate it manually. And so I integrated it manually, and now I'm in the process, because that took hours. And I have a Ryzen 9. I have a Ryzen 9 3950 with 128 gig of RAM, and it still took hours. And
But
so I
Dan,
went to bed. I woke up. I came up to it. Now I have the raw file, so now I can kind of play with it. So.
but Dan, look at this detail for a one-shot color camera. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
my goodness gracious, for everybody out there, everybody would be very happy with this.
Oh
I mean, look
man,
at the
I'd be ecstatic with something like that. In New York City, you can't get that detail with a one-shot color unless if you're all the way out on the East Coast.
Yep.
And even then, you're only at Portal 4,
Yep.
maybe 5.
Yeah, because I have a fairly dark sky, I can get by using the kind of the low end L enhance filter.
Yep. And
I didn't use it for a long time, and my color camera was just kind of not getting used. So I thought, just kind of on a whim, I thought I would try it. And on a one-shot color camera, it has really worked well for me. So that's why I put it in a filter wheel, so I can put it to good use.
Yeah, and you know what? I loved when I did M106 one-shot color from Cherry Springs at Portal 2.5, 3. I didn't have any problems. I didn't even have to do if there wasn't a like really sliver of a moon up, I probably wouldn't even have had to done a gradient subtraction on it, because it's so dark over there. So compared to what I deal with, but and the noise and everything, it all gets with a darker sky, you're able to get away with a lot of stuff.
Let's jump into narrowband, because like you say, a lot of people have to shoot that. And the example we're going to use here is the tadpoles, and this was my latest APOD. I want to talk about the kind of the shortcut to the magic. We know that a color image is made up of red, green, and blue. And if you looked at these in detail, you could see that red, green, and blue are actually a little bit different. When you combine them, you get a color image. And the trick we're going to use, and we'll just demonstrate this real quickly, is it's called the advanced blending options. And it's not really all that advanced, but it does only work on a color image. So if you've loaded monochrome data and you don't see these, then it's because you have to change the mode from grayscale to RGB. But you see here in the center, there are checkboxes for the 3 channels: red, green, and blue. What that lets me do is individually select for each layer, what color do I want that layer to contribute. So it can apply to a single layer or to an entire layer group. And I like my layers in groups. So you prepare the files, load them into Stack, and use the advanced blending options to select the colors, and then adjust and tweak however you want. So let's just go through a real simple example to show how that works. And if this doesn't blow somebody's mind, then I'll be disappointed. So I'll go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stacks, pull up my browse, and hopefully I can find, somewhat quickly find the data I'm looking for here. Yeah, let's see. It's going to be in Samples. So I think it's right here. There we go. So we have red, green, and blue. As these happen to be saved as PSD files. It doesn't really matter if they're PSDs or TIFFs or JPEGs for that matter. Click OK, and OK again, and those will load as layers in this document. And let's check the image mode real quickly. You can see it's got blue on top, then green, and then red on the bottom. If I go to image mode, it's a grayscale. That means there's no color information. So let's change it to RGB color. And no, we don't want to merge. That's why we just loaded these as layers. We don't want it to merge the layers. Now it's an RGB color image. So this top layer is the blue data. So we only want blue from this layer. So I can either go to layer styles, blending options, and it pulls up this dialog box. Here's our 3 check boxes for red, green, and blue. I only want blue, so let's just uncheck green and red. And look at that. We're starting to get some blue. Click OK. Let's go to the green layer now. And rather than going through the menu, you can just double click in this area to the right of the layer name. And that will also pull up the blending options. This is green, so we'll turn off blue and red. There you go. We just color mapped red, green, and blue into red, green, and blue to create a full color image. That I can now go to the top layer, add a levels adjustment if I want to tweak the brightness. I can adjust the saturation if I want to. I can change the color balance. So it's that easy to go from red, green, and blue to a full color image.
Wow.
And you might be getting ahead of me thinking, well, gosh, what if these had been hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur? Would that work? And I'll tell you yes. So let's look at a quick example of that. So I'm going to go back into PixInsight. And I would basically do the same thing of reviewing the data, go through WBPP, and when that's all done, it would output my master data. So let's go to the swap files and looks, that's interesting. I don't see the tadpoles there. Where did I get that from the other day? I think I pulled that in from my backup drive. No, it's not on my back. Well, we would pull it in from, let me just grab something different then. So let's see. I'm going to pull this one in, go to the master, and I'm just going to grab the sulfur, oxygen, and hydrogen. You would do the same thing with red, green, and blue. This data set's not complete, so it doesn't have blue yet. But I would go through the same process with each one of these. And let's start with hydrogen because it's the most fun. Throw a screen stretch on it. I would run my DBE typically on each one of the filters. No reason to run color calibration. So I would go directly to the blur exterminator to sharpen things up, and then go to the stretch. And because this is grayscale, we don't have to worry about linked or unlinked. So I'll just use the mouse wheel to zoom in here. And then I find typically I need to darken the background. And then if it looks like it's getting close to blowing out colors, I may darken the highlights. Just kind of depends on the data. And of course, we're throwing out, any scientific evaluation of relative concentrations of the gases, but I'm trying to make a pretty picture. And then apply that. So that gives us our grayscale image run noise exterminator, run star exterminator to get rid of the stars, and then save that as a 16-bit TIFF, and do the same thing with each of the others, including the red, green, and blue, because I want the stars from the red, green, and blue. So what we're doing here is pretty much the same thing we did with the color. So unless there's any questions, I won't spend any more time here.
Dylan had a question regarding, he said he sees, is there a light leak on the more left bottom? There's a straight line. I don't know if this was, I don't know if that was the last
Here?
set of pictures.
Oh, on the, yes, on the, that picture of Orion.
Yeah.
That's not a light leak. That's
a bright star outside of the field.
Bright star
Yeah.
glaring in, yeah.
And that was the only other question. They were talking a little bit about M45. Everyone's making fun of me because I live in a borderline sky. I mean, yeah, that's why I only do narrowband, guys. That's why I only do narrowband. You know, believe it or not, this picture behind me, this is an RGB picture. This was taken from Robert Moses State Park, which is probably a Bortle 6. So it is possible in horrible Bortle skies. You just got to keep your images short, you know, and just take a whole crap ton of them and just keep on keeping them short. Keep them short. That's it.
So let's grab some. Oh, the typically when I'm doing narrowband like this, I'll shoot RGB. I will do a channel combination of red, green, and blue.
Right.
And then run color calibration on that just for the stars.
Okay.
So you'll see when I go to my scripts, load files into stack, it keeps wanting to put it on my other monitor. And we're going to go back to the D drive, to Astro. This is under Nook 1. And I just have to find the tadpoles here. There we go. And you can see all the different times that I've run this. But I only want the latest, and I generally keep my folders sorted in descending date modified sequence. So there's my RGB stars. Here's the hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur. So let's just load those. Say OK. And as before, we'll start with some housekeeping. There's the stars. So Control G to put those in a group. Add a levels adjustment. Add a hue saturation. Double click, change the name to stars. Change the blending mode to screen. And then for now, we'll just close that group and turn off the eyeball. The next one is hydrogen. Control G. Double click to change the name. We'll add a levels adjustment. And even though I did a basic stretch in PixInsight, I can see that I need to do more adjustments here. So we'll just go ahead and do some darkening, and I'll pull the white point over to about where it starts to clip. And this is a lot cleaner data.
Yep.
And I want to pull that. I like to work with hydrogen at the bottom usually. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull it down to the bottom. Next one up is oxygen. So Control G, double click, name that oxygen, add a levels adjustment, and then do the same thing. I'm just kind of by eye darkening and brightening about where I think I want it to land. And again, because this is non-destructive, we can always come back and revisit this as we get further along in the workflow. I'm going to pull that down above the hydrogen, but below the sulfur. Control G, double click. For a levels adjustment. And I'm just kind of presetting this for about where I think I'm going to want it, but I'm sure it's not exactly where I want. So now we have 3 groups with hydrogen, oxygen, and sulfur, stars on top. We need to color map it. You want SHO?
Sure.
Let's go to sulfur. Double click out here to pull up the blending options. We want sulfur to be red, so it doesn't need green or blue. We want oxygen to be blue, so double click, turn off red and green, leaving just the blue. There's an SHO.
Wow.
You want HOO? Let's turn off the sulfur. We'll make the oxygen, double click, make it green and blue. There's an HOO version. You want, if you want HSO, the way I normally do that is I'll go to the sulfur and I'll make it green. And that usually comes out kind of ugly looking, but I'll change it from pass through to lighten. So I'm only picking up the lighter parts instead of the darker parts. And there's an HSO version. So once you get, let's go back to our SHO version. Now we might want to adjust the color balance and the intensity of the various elements. So for instance, I could go to the sulfur, click on this levels, and I adjust the levels, I can see exactly what impact that's going to have to make it more or less prominent. Turn the stars back on. Maybe minimize the stars a little bit. They're already pretty tight. I like colorful stars, so I'm going to pump some saturation into the stars. And there's getting close to a finished image.
Nice.
Wow.
That's
That
awesome.
is unbelievable.
So
Yep.
that's the Craig Stocks method of using Photoshop.
There you go.
Yeah. So Craig, classes. When do the classes start? What's because we're going to get
We
a
are
lot of
actually
inquiries.
Christian Sase and I are planning master classes in St. George in September. It'll be a week-long master class going over both astro landscape as well as deep sky, with outings every night, weather permitting, to collect data and then get together in the afternoons and for the workshop hands-on processing.
And you're going to do this on Long Island, right?
Actually in beautiful sunny St. George, Utah, which is about a 2-hour drive from Las Vegas. So you fly into Las Vegas and do some vacationing and then drive up to St. George to do some learning.
Nice. Very cool. Well, yeah, well, you know what? I refuse to go back to Las Vegas until they bring back Star Trek: The Experience at the Hilton. So, you know, then I'll come back. So I need my Romulan ale at Quark's Bar.
So, you know, asking about time, I think we spent about 10 minutes on this image.
Yeah.
And,
Oh yeah.
and in reality, I would probably come back. I want to be above the sulfur and below the stars. So I would probably add some global adjustments here. So maybe another levels adjustment to fine tune that. Probably a global hue saturation. Although, you know, once you're into hue saturation, if you don't like the yellow looks pretty green, if you want to tone that down, you can target just the yellows in a hue saturation. And then the middle slider is the one you normally use to adjust saturation. But you can also use the top one, which changes the tint. So I can make that, you know, a little more red or a little more yellow or a little more green, whatever color I want, by tweaking it here. I might want to do the same thing with the blues and cyans. I might want to make the cyans a little more blue. I might want to make the reds, maybe a little bit more intense and a little bit more red. I can do the same thing by adding a black or an almost black solid color to set that floor level, put it in light and blending mode. It doesn't have much effect here, but it has a little bit in the center. I'm not sure I even want it there in the center. I think I like it better without it. But if I decide I need to brighten some of these areas, remember that burn and dodge layer that we used? I can add a blank layer, put it in soft light blending mode, tap B for the brush tool. I'll tap X for white, 1 for 10% opacity. And then if I just make a big old brush here and tap once or twice, I can just brighten this area. Maybe I want to brighten up here a little bit, and then maybe darken around the perimeter with black to bring a little bit more focus to the center. But if I want to add a sharpening layer, I would do that at this point with the Shift Control Alternate E to create I don't want the stars in there. Turn the stars off, then do it. Shift Control U to go to grayscale. Put this in soft light. You can either use soft light or overlay. Overlay's a little bit more aggressive. Filter other, high pass. A high value does that kind of local contrast. A smaller value does the more detailed sharpening. And usually you want to go to where it's too strong and then back off some.
Nice.
And turn the stars back on, and there you go.
There you go. See if show on stream. Let me see if this works. I hope we still got we're still live. Hold on a second. It actually picked up the stream where we left off. So I apologize, everybody. For some reason, my entire internet went red and it turned off and it turned back on in about 30 seconds. It was kind of odd, but we're back. So sorry about that, everybody. That's interesting. And you know what the interesting is that we didn't have to restart. We were such a short period of time. We didn't lose the YouTube link, so everyone's still watching. So so that's even nice. Wow. Hey, that was a first. 3 years of doing the shows on Wednesdays and Fridays. That's the first time that happened during a show. So first time for everything. So apologize about the late cutoff. I didn't want to cut you off. But yeah, so were you in the middle of showing something real quick or
I'm not sure where you disappeared, but I think I got through pretty much everything that we needed to get through.
okay.
And I don't want to drag this out forever. So if there's some questions, maybe this is a good time to take some questions and wrap up this part.
Let's see. So hey Craig, you and I should meet up for lunch Wednesday afternoon at Blues Cats Cafe on Bluff Street. My treat from Corrupter. I don't know who that is, but Corrupter is saying. Let's see, to the feed, and everyone was talking about the feed stopping. People were just saying, "Hey, I love the narrowband colors. You got great teaching qualities." Then people are talking about green eggs and ham, and that's it. So yeah, so no. Oh, it's Dylan Reese over in Arizona. So he's also known as Bloodstone. I'm sorry, I forgot that's his other handle.
Okay.
So he's one of our regulars. He lives out in Arizona. Yeah, but no other questions really. So whew, that's a lot of information. That was really, really, really a cool process. It was really interesting to see how you get back and forth and how Photoshop can be used to further implement your workflow process. And it's just great to see that. When I've always heard of people going back and forth to Lightroom and Photoshop and PixInsight and use APP for stacking and PixInsight for this and then Photoshop for that, then Lightroom for that, and bring it back in. I was just I'm a one-trick pony. I'll use Photoshop, Print Shop. Oh my god, I'll use PixInsight, and that's pretty much it. And that's what I use. But it really made me think about using other tools that are available to me, because of what you showed. Because it just seems so much easier the way you did it with the blacks and the whites and the masks and that and how to make those masks. It was just a lot easier than doing a range mask for me. You know what I mean? You know.
Yeah, for me, for me it works out, but then I've been using Photoshop and digital image processing for a long time, so this is all pretty second nature to me, and I just use PixInsight as a preprocessor. But like I said, I've seen a lot of just beautiful images come out of PixInsight without using any Photoshop too. So
yeah, no, PixInsight
use
really
whatever
is.
tool best fits you.
Yeah, and we talk about that all the time too, where you got to remember that you're the artist, and whatever works for Craig, whatever works for me, whatever works for Pete, may not work for you. You may want to sit there and use Deep Sky Stacker and GIMP. I mean, and Pip, and some of the cheap, or free work, and it works for you, and that's fine. But some people may need other tools, so it's just cool to see the other outlook on that.
Craig,
Yeah, and I know some people have a real aversion to Adobe's kind of pay by the month rental, since they introduced that several years ago.
Yeah, Creative Cloud. Yeah.
Personally, I think it's fantastic because for the cost of a cappuccino, $10 a month, you can have the industry standard software right there on your computer, and that's probably the cheapest thing in your astro imaging arsenal.
Yeah.
So I tend to think it's a great thing, and I don't have any qualms at all about paying that $10 a month.
Craig, quick question to ask you. You and Christian aren't going to get together until September, so that's 7 months out. But if, say, you wanted to do a class, basically just kind of what you showed us tonight, would you be interested in putting something together where our memberships could definitely pay a fee to come in and work with you? We could just get an example image and just kind of work with you, going through the steps to be able to kind of do the keyboard steps, the mouse movements.
Yeah, sure, we could do that. This was, unfortunately, because of the amount of material, this wound up being, kind of more of a demonstration than a teaching process, probably.
Yeah.
But that was exactly what it was. It was just to show you, everybody, your workflow. But I think there's a lot of people here that really do like this workflow because they're now seeing the advantages of having groups, having layers, having masks. But they just maybe don't know the unique keyboard and mouse movement. And they'll probably need to either see a video tutorial to watch it as a step-by-step procedure, or as you said, maybe doing an online class. I mean, I will definitely sign up for that because I'm really impressed with what you got here. And I've always been fascinated by the way your post-processing techniques are. So I will definitely be the first one to sign up for a class.
So, yeah, that's something we could certainly look at.
Cool. That'd be great. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's we could talk about that offline and definitely see what we could hook up with that and figure that out.
Okay.
That would be really cool. And then we could put that out to the membership and see if anybody else is interested, because I'm sure there will be. So we have a bunch of, what do you call it? The offenders in the chat that are always there talking about, Photoshop, PixInsight and all that, and how to get pictures pretty. You know what I mean? Because people, a lot of people, what people struggle with it's not about the stacking mostly. It's about the post-processing where, getting the color that you want. What do I need to do to manipulate this? What kind of mask do I need for that? What do I need to do to make this the darker darks and the whiter is white? All that kind of stuff is some stuff that, some people do struggle with.
Yeah. Well, Dan, let's
the other thing I would
go ahead, Craig.
Pete. I
No,
was just going to say the other
say,
thing that I think is important is for people to not just have the techniques, but to have a vision of what they want to use those techniques to create. And I tell this to all of the students that I'm trying to teach photography to, is it's important to look at a lot of good examples of good photography, because you can't create good images if you don't know what a good image looks like.
Right.
And if all you do is look at Facebook, you may be seeing a lot of less than good images and not really understanding what the differences are. So, spend the time to search out the atom blocks and, the people who are, really have the reputation for creating stellar images, no pun intended,
no.
And try to understand what is it about their image that appeals to you. Is it the black level? Is it the colors? Is it the detail? And, try to figure out then how you can bring those qualities into your images.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's just a bunch of techniques with no real direction.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I think we got a lot of interest that people would definitely sign up. So you know what,
I
Dan?
seen 5 people right off the top that said I joined. Yep. So.
Yep. So what we'll do is we'll figure out how many people would get committed, and then Craig, we'll definitely work with you to see, hey, if you want to do an online, we'll pick a date and time, and literally we'll just do a paid program, and literally we'll just set it for a couple hours, and maybe we do this for 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, whatever is good for you. But definitely, I can't see the sense of waiting. Yeah, and then this way, then comes September, when you and Christian get together, then people can definitely kind of say, yeah, this is definitely something I truly want to come out to St. George to.
Yeah, and we're going to be covering, like I say, landscape astrophotography as well as deep sky. So it's a little bit broader subject.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
There's no substitute for being able to go out into the stars and collect some of your own data and then, work on that data the next day.
Yep.
And I know Christian and I have, he uses APP for the most part, where I'm more of a PixInsight and Photoshop. So I think we have a good, point counterpoint, different approaches to solving the same problem.
Exactly. As long as the solution is just the same, that's all that really matters, right?
exactly.
Doesn't
Yeah.
matter the
Well,
mythology. Just
and ultimately, the goal is not to teach you how to create my pictures. The goal is to teach you how to create your picture.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Well, good, man. That's a great.
Yeah,
As I said,
so
Craig, thank you very much.
yeah, we got
This
like
has
10
been very,
people that
very,
No
are
very
problem.
interested
informative.
in that. So that's not including Pete and myself. So, so, all right. So we do really quick have to do our year subscription IP for AP. So for those of you that do want to learn Photoshop, that's a good tool as well, because that's how IP for AP cut their teeth, was with Photoshop. And they've evolved into PixInsight, but they have plenty of tutorials on Photoshop as well. And tonight we're giving away a year subscription to that service. So let's get on the wheel real quick before everybody goes to bed, and we'll do that. So let's get the wheel up there, and here we go, and we'll get the wheel here. And we'll make it big. There we go. That's not big. There we go. And there's the wheel, and this is the same thing. Masters of PixInsight, IP for AP. They're both one and the same. But we have 146 people signed up for this giveaway. So here we go. Free 1 year IP for AP. I'm not turning my pad out so I can write this down. And the winner is Newman. Newman wins it. Norm Hughes. Norm Hughes, IP for AP. Congratulations, Newman. And we'll send that out to you. I know you. I'll send you the email, and we'll get you rolling. You'll get an email from Pete saying how you could redeem your subscription to IP for AP for a year. So congrats, Newman. Awesome. Where is my? I lost my YouTube feed. There we go. No problem, Norm. You got it. So Norm won. Actually, Craig, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's getting late on the East Coast, but thank you for coming on and hanging out with us again. This is your second
No
or
problem.
third time?
Third, I think.
I think it's your third time. Yeah. So you're getting up there with us. so I think the only person that has more. I think there's Sean has 5. Sean Nielsen and Tom Bramwell, I think, from Prima Luce. I think he's got 4. So I think those are the only 2 ahead of you. So, oh no, Dr. Sass has 3 too. So
Okay.
yep. So it's great to have you on and having that perspective of Photoshop and PixInsight working together. It's really, really eye opening.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. That hopefully people got something out of it.
No, they
Yep.
definitely did. You got a lot of people in there. A lot of people say that your teaching is wonderful. You do it in a way that's not talking down. You're talking at. So it's really good to see. Sometimes when people teach, they kind of like just say matter of fact. You can definitely tell you have a lot of passion for what you do. So it's good to see.
So I enjoy what I do.
Huh? That's a good thing.
I'm old enough. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it.
Exactly. Me too. That's why I do this twice a week, because I love doing it. But anyway, someday I'll win an autograph book and then respin. Yeah, everyone's agreeing. Everyone's agreeing with you about, yeah, we all love what we do. So again, thank you so much. I guess just real quick, Pete, you got any final thoughts of the night? Or
Just a sincere thank you to Craig. I mean, Craig, always, you're just a treat to have on as a guest. And
absolutely.
anytime you just want to come on, please just reach out to Dan, because it's just a real thrill to have you on. And just your images are just absolutely spectacular. So with what you're doing out at Utah Desert Remote, I got a feeling that you've got something special going on out there, and it's going to be something that'll be growing here by leaps and bounds over the next 5 years. So as I said, if we can help out in any way, and more importantly, if you can help out to our membership as well, it's always a pleasure to have you on. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Craig. And everybody, don't forget, I believe who's our next guest? I don't have my calendar up right now. But we got guests. We are booked up all the way until March 1st, and then we have April 1st. So we got like 5 straight Wednesdays of guests, including Bob Denny, Evo, and a bunch of other people. So check out astroweb.com and look at the calendar on there. Everything is posted on there. And I guess that's about it. So, Craig, again, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate all the time you spend with us. It's definitely been great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, everybody. So have a good night. Don't forget to come Friday night. Don't forget to vote for the picture of the week. There's a lot of really cool pictures on astroweb.com. So definitely go check that out. And if you haven't signed up for any of the giveaways, you can do that there as well. And calendars are still on sale. Don't forget, calendars are still on sale till March. So we already sold out of the first batch. We sold 30 calendars already. And I got the second set of calendars coming in. So get your 2023 picture of the week calendar from AstroWorld on the website. So everybody, have a good night. Take care. Have a great week. And remember, as always, keep imaging, keep educating in clear skies. And we'll see you Friday night. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.